Hello. So I just wanted to make a quick video about one of the big confusions that people have when they first start getting into Barry Harris stuff. And I just wanted to make this video quickly. I'm just going to front load it with the relevant information and I'll add some like sidebars and other info behind. So people talk about the Bebop scale. It's a phrase which I think originated with David Baker and has become very popular in mainstream jazz education. So you have, for instance, in the Mark Levine Jazz Theory book, he talks about bebop scales and so on. Most people get confused about the superficial resemblance of something called the major bebop scale. So in C, this thing, which is a C major scale with a G sharp added to it, and the Barry Harris bebop, the Barry Harris major sixth diminished scale, which is a C major scale with a G sharp added to it, or a sharp 5 or a flat 6, whatever, okay? Why are they different when they contain exactly the same notes? The difference is usage, right? The bebop scale is, it so happens, a special case of something called the Barry Harris added note rules. This is not a Barry Harris concept. Bebop scales comes from David Baker, right? It's something else. So to sort of transplant that idea into Barry Harris is a little bit iffy. I mean, one of my favourite videos is called, on the Barry Harris added note system, is actually entitled Bebop Scales, because it's such a common term now, people understand what that means. I'll attach a link below, it's a good video, very clear. Anyway, so the point is that that is not the same thing because the usage is different. And why? Well, because the usage of the G sharp is different in both cases. In the first case, the G sharp is purely rhythmic filler. It's just there to make the scale, as Barry Harris says, come out right. So this is a special case of the added note rule where we start on an even note number and we add in one added note. And the rule states the added note should be between the 6th and the 5th. Right, so you could come up with a variation of this scale which uses, for instance, an F sharp, which is nice, because it has an enclosure. And if anything, it's even nicer than the other one. I like that better. Or we could just, we could use an open string, for instance. Still works rhythmically. I didn't even mean to play that note, So let's see if I do it again. Not on purpose. But the point is that still came out rhythmically, right? It was still fine. And you could, go back, if you want to keep it diatonic, you go back up to the 7th. Okay, right, now the thing is that in the Barry Harris major 6th diminished scale, that note is actually used as a harmonic note. That G sharp is kind of important. And as well as that sort of basic thing of just using it to, play a scale of chords. Like that, for instance. You can use it in contrary motion. Sorry, this is really rattly guitar, it's starting to annoy me. Like that, right, for instance. Or you can play these beautiful sort of things like like these things. It can act as a portal to the relative minor. It's got all these interesting things about it. There's this just adding an extra note to the scale. It's still something I'm exploring. But the point is that G sharp is actually meant to be a G sharp. It's not just a filler note. It's actually harmonically important. For instance, you can add it into a 2-5-1 to create a 13 flat 9 sound going into, the resolution. What should be that one now? Sorry, there's a pain in the bum to reach that chord. Yeah, so the thing is like that is an entirely different thing. And it's only different because of usage. So like, it comes back to the sort of thing that I talk about. People go, oh, what's the difference? But it's like some notes are harmonic and some notes aren't harmonic. And a good analysis of any line or anything is to know the difference, right? Obviously, if I play, I don't know, there's some more advanced applications of the Barry Harris added note rules where I can add every note of the chromatic scale to, say, a dominant 7th. So if I take like D dominant 7th, that's every note of the chromatic scale, right? But it still sounds like D7, okay? Because of the way I've done it. So, you know, I mean, all the chord tones end up on a, you know, on a strong beat. But Barry Harris doesn't conceive of it that way. That's the interesting thing. Or at least he doesn't tell you. He just gives you the handout and says, these are the rules. Practice them to make the scales come out right. It's almost anti-theory, you know. It's just like, just do it. It sounds good, you know. It's like teaching somebody who wants to be a draftsperson, you know, the rules of perspective or the proportions of the human figure. They're not up for debate. You don't really have to understand them. You just have to practice them and do them, and it will make you better at what you do. The aim of learning improvisation is not to become a music theorist, it's to become an improviser. So these are rules of thumb that you can apply to make better jazz lines. Anyway, so that's an important thing. Now, there is an overlap. You can use the sixth diminished scales to create lines. Particularly, we use the minor sixth diminished because that's the basic choice for a minor scale when we're doing our scale outline. So, for instance, if I'm playing the scale outline of a minor 2-5-1, let's do it in A minor. So, B half diminished, say, E7 flat 9, A minor 6th, right? For instance, we would run these scales. We would go, okay, we're going to call that a G7, yeah? It's G7 and B half diminished, or B minor 7 flat 5 related. Run it up to the 7th, down to the 3rd of E7, and then we run the A minor 6th diminished scale. And the interesting thing is you take that scale and that scale, so if I go, they're actually both, sorry about the rattle, both parts of the A minor 6th diminished scale, right? That's kind of interesting, you know, that's a fun thing, and you can create lines, you know, by mixing that up, you know. It's very, well, it sounds like somebody said, I have a friend actually who came up with this scale independent, not knowing nothing about Barry's teaching. A guy called Duncan Hemstock, great swing clarinet player, and and tenor sax player, and he calls it the Lester Young scale. It's easy to hear why, you know. So, you know, these things were not invented by Barry Harris. They existed already in the music to be discovered. It's just that Barry's catalogued them, given them a name, and kind of shown students lots of different ways that they can, you know, explore them as improvisers. Anyway, yeah, so that's that really. Just wanted to really clear up that distinction because it's a big one. Something else which is a bit funny, which I might just put in as a sidebar, which is this idea of there being the minor bebop scale as defined by David Baker, right? In his How to Play Bebop books, which are really great books, by the way, but as I said, but maybe I can't remember if I said that in this particular video, but they're widely available and a lot of people have read them, but the terminology they use and the approach they use is different, influenced by, I think, but different from Barry Harris's approach, just to point that up. So people do get confused. And one of the things David Baker talks about is this minor bebop scale, which goes like this. It's like a Dorian mode with an added major third. So it's like that happens on the D minor 7 chord. Now, in terms of notes, well, what is that? Well, that's D, E, F, F sharp, G. Hang on. It's the same as G7. Same as the G dominant bebop scale, right? It just so happens that we're looking at it over the 2 chord. Well, that means students of Barry Harris will know that we don't really think about the D minor 7 chord and the 2-5-1. We're thinking about the G7. So that kind of bears that out, you know, bearing in mind that this dominant bebop scale is a special case of the Barry Harris added note rules. That works, you know, we're just ignoring the D minor 7th. Now, obviously, when David Baker sat down and did his analysis, he analysed that scale separately over that chord. There's no need to do that. It's just part of the G7 complex. You just end maybe on D, you know, instead of on G. So that's a little sidebar which I might talk about. This video is partly in response to the recent 12-tone video on bebop scales, which is influenced, I think, more by David Baker's writings than anybody else. I think he mentions David Baker in the video itself. So, but yeah, don't get the major sixth diminished and the bebop scales confused. Bebop scales are not a Barry Harris concept. They're a general jazz education concept that have some overlap with the Barry Harris ideas, but Barry Harris himself doesn't use them. So the coincidental resemblance between a C6 diminished scale and a C major bebop scale is, well, it's coincidental. You know, it's not a thing really. For instance, you know, again, you know, like if I highlight the Barry Harris version of a what was it, a dominant would be dominant sixth scale, right? That is different by one note from a bebop dominant scale, right? Or a dominant bebop scale. It's got the kind of cool. It's different from, which is the dominant bebop scale. So hopefully that can show you again that it is coincidental. It's not important. You should think of them as two separate entities and not get hung up on that G sharp. The way Barry Harris tells it, the rule is more important than the note. So that's something to bear in mind. Anyway, I hope that's clear and not too confusing. It's a little bit of a thorny issue for a lot of people, I think. People do get confused about it. Please feel free to leave any comments below. Thanks for watching.